Greeting, darklings, from across the interweb. It is once again I, the Duchess, Precious Ken, here for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. I have an exciting guest today. Before I do, I will do a shout out here that I wanted to for something exciting coming out. I was talking the other day to my dear friend Ethan because there is a new release that he did for his project NOIR. And this is Ethan of Spawn Ranch, Black Tape for a Blue Girl. And he just put out a series of remixes that are absolutely awesome. It, features Assemblage 23, Fires, Bestial Mouse, Silverwalks, all kinds of bands on here. And to me, just has one of those prolific voices that stands out, and somebody who just does a ton for the music scene. I highly recommend checking this out. It's called NOIR, the best of the remixes, and you can find it on Bandcamp. So next up, I will introduce my guest here. It's been a long day. It's the day after the election. We were up late last night. I watched Binging with Babbage, and we discovered something called Gator wine that involved Gator, just how it sounds, Gatorade and cheap wine, so that you maintain hydration while drinking $2 Chuck. And it got us through the night, but today has been a long one. So I had to psych myself up to get ready for this interview, but I'm glad that we did it. It's an album I was really geeked about. Eddie did a review of it already, but I also had heard it and really enjoyed it because there is a connection to our dear friend Dan Milligan and fellow Joy Thief. So without further ado, it is my pleasure from Washington, D.C., to introduce Amulet. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
I can.
Thanks for having us.
Now you are kind of all over, have collaborators from all over the place, Chicago, like I just mentioned with Dan, and other places. So why don't you start out introducing yourselves? Give me a brief little spiel about the history of the band, and also maybe give a shout out introduction to the folks who are not here.
Okay. So, do you want to do it? Go ahead.
No.
Okay,
I won't need to do
I'm
it.
Stephanie Stryker, and
I'm MJ.
yes, I also know as Michael. I can't call you MJ, but Michael is what I call you. So, Michael
I
is
might have to go Michael too, just because otherwise I'll think about Michael Jordan when I say MJ, and then I'll get a cross look on my face being a Pistons fan.
Whatever you prefer.
Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're Amulet out of Washington, D.C. And let's see. The very quick thing about Amulet is that we've been together since 2020. The end of 2020. The end of 2020. And we had formed from another previous band, but it was a cover band that we were doing for work reasons. So I wouldn't say that it was a creative project. It
Sure.
it was a work project. But
Now, were you like covering several things, or was it like a tribute band where you covered a particular band?
it was actually a cover band. It was
Oh,
just
okay,
like
cool.
you talk, work friendly party hits, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Bob Seger all the time. Got it.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And,
Actually, we didn't play any Bob
but
Seger.
that kind of thing.
Yes.
We did a lot of Tom Petty.
There seemed to be a predominant amount of Tom Petty. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the record, whenever someone kind of brings up the whole "what is goth" thing, which pisses me off, I always say that Full Moon Fever is one of the top 10 goth albums of all time. So that's how broad I like to keep my genres.
I'm gonna have to go and listen with that ear. So we were like, I don't know, we don't really want to do a cover band anymore. Let's start jam. And you had the gumption to say, let's start making our own songs. And I have no background in music except for just singing karaoke. And so I was like, okay, whatever, I'll just sing whatever you want me to do? And that's how it began.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I just had an idea that we could do a concept album for no good reason. Um,
Always a
but
good
you know,
reason.
I grew up in the 1970s and 80s back in England, and at the time, everything was kind of concept albums. There was, The Wall by Pink Floyd was the
Sure.
classic that we like, the nice double album, and then the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks, and all that kind of stuff. And you got an album. In fact, the last Led Zeppelin album was a little bit like that as well. But I just like the idea of a cohesive album which the listener can kind of go through and it tells some sort of a story.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was my original intention, was to write something like that. But we were just really getting started, and I think the first album didn't quite end up being a concept album per se, but nevertheless, we're kind of cutting our teeth and learning about writing. And it sort of went from there, really. I think COVID was the secret to the whole thing, and maybe that helped a lot of other bands. But I don't think, despite the brash sort of suggestion we do a concept album, I very much doubt, if it hadn't been for COVID, that I would have actually gotten it done, because I just didn't have time for it. And then
Right.
suddenly all this time appeared, and I'm like, oh, okay, here's the opportunity to start working on this. Um, so I'm pretty sure a lot of other bands might have had a similar experience to that, that suddenly they found COVID provided them a creative opportunity. But that's sort of what kicked it into higher gear, at least for the first album. So that's how we kind of got started, really.
Hmm.
Beautiful. I think that's definitely true. I mean, I've done a lot of these interviews, and a lot of people have said to me recently that was a huge driving factor for them, both the time factor, but also, I don't know, the being alone with your thoughts factor. I think for a lot of people, really,
Yeah.
fired them in where they're like, wow, I really better get this out because I've buried it deep for too long, and otherwise maybe I'll never say it?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty gothish vibe when you're sort of stuck alone in the basement with this awful, plague going on around you. I mean, it sort of goes back to the Middle Ages, and
Pretty dark.
it was a dark time. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it did give rise to something positive, at least for us.
Sure. No, I think that really did start off a new wave of goth for certain that I think really did rise out of the ashes of COVID. So that's great.
Yeah, I'm
Before
curious actually about, some of these other bands like The Cure, and who are coming out with albums. It would be interesting to know how much of that new creative push from some of the kind of classic bands who are now touring again, how much of that happened because of COVID. I don't know that we've got a really good answer to that, but I would be surprised if it didn't play a role in some of that as well.
I mean, I can tell you scientifically, there's several bands I've interviewed of kind of the, well, like Christian Death that have said just that, that it was a huge factor for them. And also seeing bands like Twin Tribes and Actors and, like that coming out and kind of bringing goth back to the limelight made them say, hey, I think I still have something else to say where maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. So I think that's awesome, and that it kind of inspired from both sides.
Yeah, well, that's what happened to us, and I just started writing stuff and shared some of it with Stephanie, and suddenly found I didn't really know this about Stephanie. I knew she was a good singer because we were in this band together,
Sure.
but I didn't know that she had certain other attributes which work very well, at least for my creative sort of process, which is she's not one of those people who says, oh, no, that's not going to work. And no, it should be different or something else. She's like, yeah, let's try that. Let's do it. Let's have a go at that. Let's see what happens. And to me, that was suddenly like very eye-opening, that suddenly this person had been sitting in front of me all this time, but we never really approached new like original material. So I had no
Sure.
idea that she had this sort of creative spark, or worked well with my creative spark, but it suddenly turned out that's what was going on. Even though she was living in Texas at the time and I was here up in DC. So Yeah, I think a whole part of it was the fact that we were able to work well together. That was the other big secret to things working for, writing original material for us.
No, that it's a great point, and something I think people really underestimate is that doing a band is like being in a family together. And more often than not, it's not going to work. Like you have to really truly have two people that communicate well, can be patient with each other. I mean, if you're locked in a van on the road for like 6 hours, it's real easy to want to stab somebody. And unless you have the type of collaborative relationship where you can talk through aggravating tough times and then do that also with egos involved when it comes to art, because songs and art are your baby. And when someone is talking about offering feedback and criticism on that, it's real easy to be like, what did you just say about my baby? Uh, Are you
Yeah.
trying to get cut? Because that can happen. So no, I think that's a great point. So before we move on from history, I always like to ask, there was a moment, uh, and I think especially for you guys, because there is, when I listen to your music, one of the things I really love about it, it has a very traditional goth sound to it. Like I think very much Vision Things, Sisters of Mercy, or what have you. But there is something very traditional about it that I think is lost a bit. And part of that is the theatric nature of your songs. Your songs have pageantry. And people don't do that as much in goth these days. It's kind of about being understated and cool and like, you know, it, that very much was kind of like the European new wave goth movement, is to do minimalist and underplayed. And I love the fact that you guys do goth big, and to the point where, are you so goth that like Andrew Eldritch, you won't even admit to it? You're like, no, we're a rock band, Ken. We don't even like when you use that word. But was there a moment in your history where you saw a show, heard an album, read Lord Byron, whatever it was, but something you did sparked in you, this style of music is me, and this is the scene that I feel a part of. Each of you tell me a little bit about what that moment that kind of put you onto this was.
You should start, I think, with this.
Man, this is a tough question.
Yeah, I'm a fake music journalist. I hit the hard hitting questions.
Very hard hitting question. I mean, I've been labeling myself a goth since I was like 10 or something.
Oh wow.
And and I'm not sure exactly what happened to me, but I went to New York and I came back and I wanted to dye my hair black. So I don't know what happened there, but something happened. And I that's when I say I started to like, turn darkly inclined. It took me a while to kind of understand even what I was doing.
Sure.
Um, but for some reason, I was attracted to the dark. So I just kind of rolled with that for a very long time. And I was a mall goth. And that's how I got into alternative music of any kind, even though it really was mainstream, but I didn't know that at the time. And then when I turned 18, I could go to the clubs. And I went there and I heard the what was it? It was Epicenter by VMV Nation.
Oh,
And it
man.
was like, oh my God, this is it. I died and went to heaven. Uh, this is it. And I never wanted to leave the club. Yeah, and I got dragged out by my friends who did not get it, but I loved that moment. So just from then on, I don't know, I just became like a graver, I guess, because I still listen to goth and industrial and grave music. So that's just been me forever, and I've always been this like ridiculously bell-sleeved pageantry fancy person ever since I was like born. I was like body painting myself when I was 2 years old. I don't know what's wrong with me, but
No,
that
no, I love it. I'm there for it. I was the same way. I mean, Irish Catholic pageantry when I was that young, but yes, same.
yes, I mean, yeah, that's fabulous. So
You
that's
both have candles, you're both burning incense. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover.
yeah, totally. So that's been me for like a very, very long time. And then we were in this cover band together, and I was just doing it. It was fun. It's whatever. It's for work. And then we started talking about making music together. And as a person who likes to please, I just did whatever he said. But I didn't know for a long time that he was trying to write music for me, like in my styles, but he didn't know what they were yet.
Yeah, I hadn't quite completely figured it out, but
Passing it to you.
yeah, well, I knew Stephanie was going to be singing, so I wanted to write something that I thought was going to work for her. And then over time, it kind of got more integrated into Stephanie's real full style. So I was because we weren't together for most of the first album. She was in Texas, like I said. So I was kind of trying to dream up what I thought was going to work, and then sending her ideas, and she would do scratch vocals, send them back, and I'd work on things. And yeah, I mean, I think we got it pretty good, considering, but I've learned a little bit more about what she's really into since then. But I mean, I was into bands like The Cure when they got started, so I don't think the goth label was really floating around so much at that point. Um, but I grew up, like I said, in England in the 70s and 80s, and I went through a lot of different phases of music. Everything
Like,
from
were you hanging out at like factory parties and stuff? Like,
I used to go to Camden Palace, which was where Steve Strange used to run parties,
yeah,
and Heaven, which was one of the places that everybody liked to go. Lamar used to hang out
yeah.
down there, and house parties back in Liverpool with Frankie Goes to Hollywood and things like that. So there was a lot of stuff going on at that time. Um, and it was fun, but I never really thought of that particular labels. It was just music that I liked, and so in this sense I'm just like started cooking up something that I thought would be something I could serve at Stephanie's dinner table that would work for her. And it started to gel, and then over time we've perfected it more. You talked a little bit about the creative process, but I mean we spend a lot of time talking about writing music and our different approaches, and we each have a different approach, and we understand each other's approach in great detail by now.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean this is like an entire body of work to itself, understanding each other's creative process,
True.
which we spend probably more time talking about that than we actually do creating music itself. Um, but I
I,
think it's
I
that.
think that's brilliant. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, a lot of people go the other way, which is kind of, well, we all want to be in a band and do it, so let's stumble into it and see what comes of it. And a lot of times, what comes of it is it takes two albums to figure each other out. And you guys sound like you really talked through. We want to sound like our first album is our third by really knowing each other and knowing how to make that work right.
Yeah, I feel like the second album, Catharsis, is really kind of bringing together like a good representation of where we've gotten, and a contribution from both of us intellectually and musically and in every emotionally in every way to that album. Whereas the first one it was much more crunchy because of what was going on at the time, and it was sort of a hit and hope, but it actually ended up working pretty well. But this current album was much more, Stephanie played a much larger role in the writing part of the second album than the first album. And that was just because we were actually able to do stuff together, physically talk to each other and work on stuff simultaneously, which was
Right.
harder on the first album. We did some, but this one's much more so.
So when it comes to is it that you kind of have roles where a lot of times you're coming with a music idea and kind of laying down, a melody and a drum idea? Stephanie, I know you do the singing. Do you do most of the lyrics, things like that? Or do you guys kind of collab on everything? Because, like you said, you're working a lot on concepts. So, are you talking through concepts of what this song is going to entail before you even figure out what the lyrics are for it to make sure that it fits and is cohesive?
It's kind of all over the map. Um, the first album was very much, I mean, I played bass in bands previously, primarily. I played some guitar, but mostly bass. And so most of the first album started with bass lines. This album started from all kinds of different places. How would you characterize it?
Yeah, it really depends because sometimes, like you just said, you'll wake up in the morning with a bass line in your head. You just did this the other day. And you're like, I need to get this down right now. And you're going to put down music. And then you're like, hey, come and figure out some lyrics for this thing. And that happens a lot. But also sometimes I have lots and lots and lots of poems and lyrics. And even sometimes I try and write music in our in Logic, and then that sometimes happens and turns into a song. And then sometimes I'm just like, I have to express a feeling now, and I need to do that with you somehow. And we just have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, this was like the all entry point album for writing stuff. It was like there was no consistent pattern. We actually had a studio in Baltimore for a while, and we had didn't we get like a lot of sticky notes or something?
Yeah.
And we were imagining this sort of huge thing, and it didn't really follow along with that quite, but it was a good concept. Um, but yeah, sometimes it would start with music. Sometimes Stephanie would show up with a kind of completed vocal idea. Sometimes I'd write a song and then go to Stephanie and I'd have a hook and she'd do some verse lyrics. And it was very much an integrated project in which we both collaborated. I did most of the music, but Stephanie also did some music. And then Bob, Bobby Carr,
Mhm.
also contributed as well. He plays rhythm guitar with us live and is part of the band and also has so brought some contributions on a few songs. Some of the on Erase Me helped us. Erase Me was boy, that song took forever to like. There were two songs on this album. The first album, Witchfinder, was like the one that took way longer than anything
That was
else.
my song,
I just couldn't come up with a bass line. I came up with 51 different ideas
Oh,
Witchfinder.
on
wow.
Witchfinder.
Yeah.
Yeah, 51 different ideas. And in the end, it was like, keep it simple, stupid. And that was the way to do it. Um, on this one, I think the songs that were the real tricky ones, Dirty Hard Beats, we really fished around to get that one done. And then Erase Me started off in FL Studio on an iPhone, and the entire melody of it was written on a trip to Iceland, and then Wales in the end on an iPhone. The whole thing, it was just like this most complex melody in FL Studio, and I was just determined to complete this thing just out of pure curiosity as could it be done. Um, and then that was the basis for the MIDI part, and then we kind of started making all kinds of changes to it. And then it turned out the timing of the chorus was like completely wrong. It just wasn't going to work. We had to totally redo the chorus. Then it turned into this like super heavy, like almost metal chorus with Stephanie really belting it out.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyway, that just took forever to figure out. Some of them were quick. That was not.
We're still
Sure.
figuring it out now. Like, I'm still learning things about myself every day that I work with him because he's very patient with me, and I have a lot of emotions I need to discuss and figure out how to express them in music. And I don't have a musical background per se, so it's harder for me to express like how I want to express it. So,
Sure. No,
it,
no, I get that 100%. That's what makes for a good team, you know? And bringing those different skills together. I also got a great picture in my head when you described that of like a crazy serial killer like whiteboard with all the sticky notes with like strings between them that became songs where you're like bass line, lyric. But I picture that of you guys leaving notes for each other as you're going through trying to write songs. That's beautiful.
Well, a lot of the notes are like kind of done in Google Docs, right? No, like
Like an Apple Notes
we have a
thing.
whole like structure because you must know like when you're doing song production, and you mentioned earlier on like we do a lot of production and stuff. Like our songs tend to have a lot of layers, and
Mhm.
each one is like a huge project to itself. And keeping everything organized, so you don't lose parts and stuff like that, is really important. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a whole part of our project which mostly Stephanie has organized, which is about just keeping the stuff organized, keeping the stems together and the versions of the stems and everything together so that, we don't come to actually, and worked with Dan Milligan, who, and Dan has been the
You.
producer on the most recent album, and he did all the drums, and Dan is awesome. But we had to give all that stuff to Dan in a way that he could actually work with. Um,
Right.
so being organized on our end and being able to communicate with the producer with these files is a super important part of the project. And it's like the opposite of the creative process in a way. Your brain needs to be just like, you know, thinking expansively and open to stuff. And then here it has to be really regimented and like in a really rigorous process.
Yes.
So that was kind of an interesting part of it as well.
So you brought up something there that, again, I hear a lot of bands. You know what I mean? Just doing the review page and everything. I hear thousands of bands. And one of the things that makes you guys stand out to me is definitely part of this, I think, is due to practicality. But nowadays, and we do this too, instead of having a live drummer, a lot of bands use backing tracks and whatnot for drums because it takes up a lot of space to bring a drummer with you. You know, I mean, and you need to be efficient to go on tour these days or play out in shows and use every bit of space that you have. But when I listen to your album and hear Dan's real organic drums mixed with those digital drums and loops and sounds and things like that, that's what makes me feel like this is old school traditional goth, you know? And so whether it's that or James, another at Dan's studio, or Rob, or another dear friend of mine who's an incredible synth master guy, doing 11 grams. Tell me a little bit about, you guys made this core, you made this concept, but you went out and got heavy hitters to come in and add some of these brush strokes that really made your album stand out from the crowd. Tell me a little bit about how you got them involved and what you felt like that added when you heard Dan and them sending you the stuff back, where you were like, oh,
Yeah, well, Rob Early is a friend from the club scene in DC, and we kind of knew him in the scene before we really appreciated what he was doing with his music. But we kind of became friends, personal friends in a way before we became musical friends.
nice.
Um, and then we started. Somehow we ended up going over to Rob's place, and we needed
Project in
something,
which
and it seemed like he might be able to help us with it. And then slowly but surely, so we like to go over to Rob's and we all hang out because we're buddies, and we order like DoorDash, and he helps us with stuff. And yeah, he's just a great guy. I mean, he's just such a
He's one of the first guys I, kind of from just never meeting him in the music scene, that I became Sounds and Shadows friends with. He was one of the first people I reviewed, actually.
Yeah, I like Rob in particular because he asks questions, and I so many people that I meet um, talk about themselves, and Rob actually asks about other people, and that's something you're doing right now, and it's nice, it's refreshing, and so I kind of connected with Rob because he asked questions. I'm like, wow, this guy's actually interested in something, and so we kind of just hit it off like that, and he did some mixing for us and some electronic production on some of the tracks, um, particularly on So Cold initially, and then on Total Power Exchange. I think a couple of others, and we also recorded some vocals over with Rob too.
Mhm.
So he's a personal friend. Dan did a remix for us, right?
Yes.
And then he did such a good job on the remix. We're like, this guy, that's the guy. So when we were ready, we went over to Chicago and we met Dan for lunch and we just talked about, maybe he could do some production on the album for us. And he was like, yeah, I'm all in. So he did more than just the drums. I mean, he did some guitar, he did some keyboards, little bits of icing and like little touches. He helped restructure a few things. And yeah, I mean, he's ultimately like the most patient guy. Um,
For sure.
so, we tested his patience at times.
Mhm.
Like there's one song, Thorn of the Rose. And I remember it was fairly early on. I had most of the stems ready. And for some reason, at one point, we wanted to do like a Spanish guitar part, right? In the ending of Thorn of the Rose. So like I was trying to play this kind of Spanish guitar part and I wasn't really feeling it. And then suddenly somewhere out of this thing just comes a guitar solo. It's in G or G sharp or something. Anyway, it's just playing this guitar solo. I'm like, whoa, that's something. There's something. And then I'm like, oh yeah, but if I'm gonna do that, then I'm gonna have to change the bass line to support that. And then I'm gonna have to change the rhythm guitar, support that. And then suddenly this whole section of the song's unraveling, and Dan's already got most of the stems. And I'm like, Dan, please, I'm not gonna do this to you every time, but just bear with me here. There's something going on. There's a thing happening here. There's gotta play out. It's gotta happen. Um, so yeah, he was very patient with that, and he put in his drums in there, like really emphasized. There's this section in the song. It's kind of a build right before there's a dropout, and it's more like just almost a cappella section. And it's this kind of build, is the interplay between the lead guitar and the bass. Um, it's just really, I don't know. Well, I really liked it. I mean, you hope to really like your own music. I really like this
Sure.
part. Dan, I did this drums. It had drama to it. The bass and the lead just play off each other. But he was super patient with that because it was supposed to be something else. And I'm like, please, Dan, just believe me that I'm not going to screw with every track right after it's finished and change the whole thing around. And he was patient.
Mhm.
And we didn't do that after that. That was the one, like, but it was right at the beginning. And I'm like, oh no, he's
Is
going to.
this my you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And you were
Right.
kind of like, is this who this guy is gonna think I am forever and
That's right.
ever?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, please, please, just like work. It's just got to work, and he's going to be okay with it. But I feel like it worked, and it was all panned out pretty well.
Yeah.
Dan is one of the most laid back, patient dudes in the world. And the other thing, kind of like you said, he's one of those, I've known few people like this in life where he's a drummer and one of the most amazing drummers I've ever worked with. But he also, talented prick that he is, can sit there and pick up a guitar and hang with me or Colin, pick up a bass, probably grab a hammered dulcimer or whatever. And Dan could just learn to play it in 5 minutes because he's one of those just gifted musicians who can do anything.
Damn.
Yeah, and James helped us with the studio and recording, and then in the end, he played bass on "So Cold" because we were looking for a different tone, and the bass I had just it wasn't really getting the tone we wanted. So in the end, we asked James to try and do a take on the bass line, which he did, and we liked it, so we used that one instead. So that was great. So he's got his fingerprints on the music as well as on the production and recording parts.
So we
Nice.
wanted to pick people, we kind of suss people out who are, I don't know what word to use, but they're just very, very detail oriented and they can
Sure.
see like a huge vision of visionaries, I guess. And
Yeah.
I really love being extremely anally detail oriented with everything and visionary. So everyone that we picked did that really, really well.
Yeah, I think the main criteria is if you can.
Keep talking, keep talking.
Yeah, the main criteria is if you can put up with us, then that's a main thing, really.
Frozen.
I think we unfroze. Look,
You're unfroze now. You're
yeah,
good. But no, I agree with you. I mean, I think that's a big deal and kind of like we talked about the idea of communication and everybody that you bring in is another potential bag of issues. and like finding the right people who aren't issues that bring more to the table than they take away. A lot of times that's the hardest challenge in a band, right? I mean, you could have somebody that was a fretboard fireworks absolute axe master, but if their issues and drama and they're going to take away more than they give, so yeah, no, I agree with you there. Going along with that, I feel like you guys also, when you chose what label to go with and distribute, chose another dear friend of mine, Jim and Distortion, that again is one of those people utterly committed to, rather than making an artist's life harder, saying, okay, I love what you're doing. I want to make that shine. I want to bring something to the table that lifts that up, not be a pain in your butt. How can I help you? So when you guys kind of found Distortion and decided to go with Jim, tell me a little bit about what that was like and how that helped you take things to the next level.
Yeah, I didn't really know that Jim had a label actually. We saw him at Dark Force Fest in Red Locust, and I
Uh-huh.
just remember like Jim really puts his effort into his performance,
Oh,
and he was like screwing it down. He was like moving around. He was like putting the real power into it, and he was really expressing himself. And I appreciate that. I think that's great. Not everybody does that, and I noticed him really putting everything into his performance. So we saw him later on at the stand, which turned out to be Distortion stand, and I just got chatting with him and said I thought he thought he did a really good job because people don't usually tell you that. I don't know. I mean, I figured I'd just tell him because I thought he deserved some kudos for his what he did, and then we just started getting chatting, and he mentioned he'd got a label, and we said, oh well, we're a band, we don't have a label. And he said, oh, well, when you send me some stuff. So a while later, we sent him some tracks, and then it was actually some remixes. We released some remixes with him, and then we sent him some demos of new original material, which he liked. And funnily enough, we didn't put like some of the original material we sent to him was The Long Walk, Dark Angel. We didn't even release yet.
Yeah.
But a couple of the tracks we did, and yeah, I mean, Jim, I think, does this with a passion. He loves the music. It's a difficult genre to make a lot of money at as a label, and I don't think Jim's in it for that. He's in it because he loves the music and wants to provide a platform for bands and to, you know, reach out to people, make it easy for them to hear and get access to some high quality music that they might otherwise not get a chance to hear. So it's been great. Jim works very hard. He's a super nice guy. We love him.
And he didn't tell us like how fast we had to do anything or
Yeah,
what
he
to
gave
do at
us
all.
he gave us a lot of leeway
Yeah.
as to what we would do. And he's got the Electronic Saviors 7 coming out, which we also put a track on, which we were really pleased with that track.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it out.
You
Yeah.
guys have a track that's going to be on that?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's
Nice.
called Queen of
Yeah.
Codependency.
Yes.
Well, yeah, Amaranth is working on the DL with a dog tablet for
Ah,
a
Oh.
track coming out on it, where I think secretly we might have invented outlaw country industrial.
Ooh,
that would be
wow.
cool.
That
I
would
tried to get like my, Nick Cave meets Waylon Jennings going on my vocals for it. So
all
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. That does sound really, really
Good
cool.
idea.
Yeah. Ours, what's ours like genre wise? It's just
The POP.
yeah, it's like synthwave sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yes, it's synth poppy type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got a lot of synths and ops in it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I had a cat there that couldn't decide whether it was going to go in or out. So
That's what they
They do that.
They do that.
It does have a guitar solo in it though. That's
That's
the only thing that makes it maybe a little bit less synthy.
Yeah, it's true. So
So you guys have the new album that came out. That, like I said, we did a review. We're excited. What about the future? What is it if we did an interview with you guys 1 year from now? What is it that you want to be talking about then? Whether it's you're hoping to tour or excited to go out on the road or go overseas or anything like that, whether it's to do more music and albums and that's what you're excited for and to do in the future. If we're having that interview 12 months from now, envision on your board what it is that you want to be talking to me about.
Well, you want to mention the project with Chris?
Yes, so we're already working on our next album. With Chris Hall from Stabbing Westward. He's producing the album. And
Timeout. Whoa.
yes.
It's Chris Hall, who I saw pretty recently and is a freaking vampire. It's not
No.
fair that that guy looks and sounds like he does still. From me having a flashback to 15-year-old Ken sitting in his bedroom because some girl done me wrong, crying about it, listening to Stabbing Westward, and that he still sounds that amazing. Him and Walter are just class dudes that I love how they're still lifting up the scene. So
Yeah.
tell me how Chris Hall wandered into your life.
Okay, so
It was Eric's fault, right?
yes, Eric Christopher of Unicode Machine. Well, we owe it all to him. Has he been on this show?
He has. I haven't released it yet, but I
Oh,
did a interview with Eric before the break. We've met a few times at like Cold Waves and whatnot, and I'm actually going to see him open for Pig next Saturday in Detroit.
yes,
Right.
that's excellent. So Eric,
Well, you knew Eric from Texas.
yes, I actually, well, it's kind of complicated story, but Eric and I actually met online because it was COVID.
Oh,
So in Dallas, all of the clubs decided to do Twitch clubs, and he was just in the chat at some point, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna check out that guy's music," and I was like, "Hey, that's cool. I like those tunes. That's very
well,
cool."
we had a song with the same title, right?
That was part
Oh,
of
nice.
that was
Sorry.
it. Jumping the gun here. So yeah, he has a song called Falling Down, and we also have a song called
Yes.
Falling Down. So I was like, hey, that's funny. How about that? And I
Were either of them based on the movie with Michael Douglas?
no, but
No, although I've seen that movie and maybe subconsciously it like lodged back there, but not
It's a good film. It's a good film.
It is a great film, yeah.
so
And
we
features an industrial soundtrack from Frontline Assembly.
oh my
Ah,
god, I
we,
didn't know
we
about
should watch it.
sample.
We should watch
Yeah.
it. It's good.
I have to watch that then.
Yeah.
Anyway, to make a longer story longer, so we eventually we met at the club at the church. I can't remember like the cadence and like the timeline, but we met and he did a remix for us after we requested a remix.
Yeah, I was really nervous about it. That was our first remix, and I'm like, what's he gonna do to our song?
Like,
Oh my
we don't
god.
know the remix culture yet. So it was he was very, very gracious and he did a great job on
He really did. He really did.
yeah.
And that changed my view on remixes and on everything, really. I mean, that started me thinking, I don't have to worry. I don't have to play everything. I don't have to control everything. It doesn't have to be, this is like, we can open it up to other people and we can work with other people and it'll make it better, not like this sort of, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to our song? Changed my whole view. It's Eric that did it all.
Yeah.
So
But
thanks,
it
Eric.
is scary. Like we talked about earlier, like communicating, you're handing your baby to some rando mofo in Texas and hoping that he takes care of your baby. But what if he
Yes.
doesn't? It's a legit scary thing. I also I remember we had Eric from Adoration Destroyed that did a first Amaranth remix, and it was the same thing. And then he sent it back to me, and it was better than my song. And ever since then, I've been like, "You prick! How
Yeah.
dare you,
Well,
sir?"
Chris Hall tends to do that as well.
Definitely did that for us. Damn it.
At least then, if it was, I would have been like, well, okay, I expected it to be better than my song. But with Eric, I was like, oh, thanks. this is brilliant. Why didn't I think of doing it that way?
Yeah, I had a little bit of that angst, but then I'm like, hold on a minute, like expand your brain. You could do this as well. Like you can learn from this,
Yeah.
all those little synth things and stuff. We can do that. It's just like expand your brain. And that's kind of where I came in. And that's where I'm comfortable with James playing bass. I used to be like, oh, I got to play all the bass lines. I got to play all the guitar lines, everything like that. And fortunately, I got saved from that mostly by Eric's starting doing this remix for us.
Yes. And so Eric has helped a lot. He has been in the music scene for a long, long time.
And he introduced us to Chris.
And that's part of my story.
Sorry, I keep jumping the gun. You're making a long story very, very long. Because I keep interrupting you. That's why, yeah.
You keep going on a tangent. Okay. I'm almost
That's
ready
why I'm
to
here.
you. Eric is a very helpful mentor. Okay, I want to get that message out. And he was super helpful. And I was like, hey, you met Chris Hall in this very insane way that he should tell. I
He
hope that
did on our interview.
okay, good.
The story is
Go
great.
listen to his interview next, because he needs to tell that story. And then he just introduced us to Chris, and we're like, hey, we're looking for remixes. And Chris is like, okay, that sounds cool. We can do a remix. But actually, I'm kind of into production, and that was a few years ago. And so now it's finally happening. Anyway, that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we started that, and we're working on our first track.
Yeah.
From this next thing. We actually wrote all of those songs at the same time as the Catharsis songs, but they have their own theme and vibe that just didn't click with the Catharsis
Yeah.
tracks.
So we have all
So
the material written.
it's all done.
It needs to be in production, and
It's a story. The whole thing tells a story.
you can hold the story.
I'll hold the story. Can I tease it?
It's a
Tease the story.
okay. Yeah, give it a tease.
Give me a taste.
Well, basically, it's a kind of classic story in which Stephanie, in this case, dreams up a book that contains a spell that she should not have read. But of course, she reads it anyway.
Forbidden fruit must be tasted.
Yeah. And
Always.
from that point on, things go downhill.
So the theme
Oh, wait, sorry.
is
With
fear.
fear. It's about fear.
It's fear, and the fear being like personified in a vampire theme.
But it's really only a metaphor for fear in general.
Yeah. Yes.
Nice.
And it's got a twist in the tail.
We're exploring fear via vampiric tendencies.
Nice. I like that. That's exciting. Okay. So we have that to look forward to.
It's called We Are the Dark, by the way.
No, that's a working title.
It's a working title.
Yes.
Do you have anything coming up live wise where people could see you play live, whether it's a show, a festival, anything like that that you guys have coming up to do?
We do.
Yes, we're playing in Philly at Mike Saga's Vortex on the 15th of this month, November 15th. Then the next thing on the books is one of our parties called Sinistry here in DC. And
Well, Arlington, Virginia.
it's the DC area.
DC area.
Yeah. No, people not from this area don't know where that is.
And you guys do like promote shows there?
We have this
When you say our thing, that's why I was kind of like, oh, do you mean like one that
it's
you're
our
putting?
concept.
Yeah, it's sporadic, but it basically includes various performances, contortion and swinging from things and
Very
flames and things of that nature, and the band. And so it's on Valentine's Day, Feb 14th, at a venue called the Renegade in Arlington, which is right near the metro. It's a really cool space. It takes about 350 people. It's got a nice stage. It's got a great sound system. The guy who owns it, Patrick, is awesome. He's a goth. He loves the scene. He's got all this Bauhaus stuff upstairs. His cat's called Peter Murphy. He's just great.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
so
I
he-
keep hearing amazing stuff about DC, and I need to get out there. We interviewed Anastasia and Cemetery Sex and their slings and arrows, and kind of talked about that and hear a lot about it. And I just love to see how vibrant it sounds like the scene is there, especially, going back to like the DC punk scene of Fugazi and things like that, the long history of it. It's so cool to hear that it's having this goth renaissance of all these great events.
Yeah, there's a lot of people working to do a bunch of different events, so that's really good to see for sure.
By the way, I've just realized your background, it's been telling me something all along, and it's Blondie, Heart of Glass.
Ooh,
Know the like the album. I'm not sure the album was called Heart of Glass. I think it was, but no, it's called Parallel Lines. The album is called Parallel
yeah.
Lines, and the front cover is black and white stripes.
I
That's
wonder
what
if
was like
Jim, yeah, had that in mind.
triggering something.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me that he did. He did a couple different ones for us, but yeah, the black and white is one. And instead of the red, it makes me look like pale and tragic rather
Yeah.
than red and drunk. So
Yeah.
That's what we like. We like both really, but
yeah, you can't go wrong either way.
yeah, really. So anyway, those are the only ones on the books at the moment, but we are talking to Midwestern friends about shows.
We didn't really try booking much recently because we've been
Tried to yet.
like the album just came out recently, and we're kind of really still. And then we've got this other set of songs to produce. But we'll try and book some more shows, hopefully.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you're ready for Midwest booking in Chicago, Kalamazoo, or Detroit, hit me up.
Okay,
That would be great. That would
yeah,
be very cool. Thank you. Yeah, love to.
definitely.
All right, so we are coming up to the end of the interview here. But one of the things that I always like to ask is that artists that I enjoy in here, I like to hear what are some things that you're listening to or you're inspired by. So if each of you could give me one or two bands that you're listening to, and it could be somebody that's on Distortion with you, or just somebody you've played with, or just something that you enjoy. It doesn't have to be goth or industrial or whatever, just whatever you're into at the moment. Tell me a little bit about what's inspiring you so that our fans and fans of yours can go look for that band.
I have obvious ones. I really actually do listen to Unicode Machine and Stabbing Westward a lot. So
Those are great. Eric in particular, it was funny. I was interviewing Nesh of like Pig and KMFDM on Sunday, and he's on tour right now playing guitar for Raymond Watts. And I remember he was kind of talking about Eric and Unicode Machine. It amazes me. You see Eric, who's like a big, burly freaking dude like me, but way taller, you know,
yeah,
and you would never think that the voice of an angel like Martin Gore or some shit comes pouring out of him, and there it is.
I
And
know.
Eric is always a surprise to me that he opens his mouth and Martin Gore comes out with a halo and wings and shit. And it just blows me away. But he's this giant, like gruff, I wouldn't want to run into that guy in a back alley type dude.
Didn't you say that the other day? Basically, like
He doesn't seem gruff to me. He seems like
not that it was
super
rough. That
friendly.
his voice was a surprise. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little surprise. No, I mean, I heard his voice before I met him.
That's true. That's true.
And yeah, he just seems like a big teddy bear to me. He's a lovely guy.
He is. I mean, he definitely is. But I just mean, if you didn't know him, you never said a word to him. He is a large figure that you
Yeah,
wouldn't
that's true.
expect him to just. "Oh."
And he has that hat as well.
I want to shout out one of our Distortion fan bands that I'm loving, Tragic Impulse.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good
I
one.
really like them. That's my
What do you
shit.
love about Tragic Impulse?
Just like that um I don't know, that very dancey, like, industrial dance type of vibe. That's my stuff. And I
They
really
do
like that.
stops. What I call it, like you
Yeah.
go into a club, Tragic Impulse definitely just plays stomps.
Yes, it's stompy oomsy. It's
I can't explain it like when I'm doing music review, but there's there's jams, there's tunes, and there's stomps.
Yes.
And to me, they are very different things, and I know the difference.
I say that type of thing too. I'm like, oh, this is not a jam, but this is like a bop.
That's
Like,
a bop. That's a tune. That's a stomp.
yes, that
So
happens.
when I was growing up in England, they used to have this thing on the radio called desert island discs. So the idea was, if you were marooned on an island, which records would you take with you,
Yes.
assuming you had electrical power and other things and didn't die of
Yeah,
dehydration?
the professor rigs up a coconut to make a solar reflector so you can play your
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you could do it. So if I have to take one song to a desert island, that I have to listen to that one song forever, and only that song, do you know which one it's going to be?
Relax.
No.
I mean,
No.
that's a
Could
bop.
be.
You'll know though. It's by Grendel,
Oh my
Ooh,
god.
okay.
I
and-
didn't know it was that hardcore for that.
and it's called Age of the Disposable Body.
Oh, that's a great one. And you threw back to when I talked about Eric Gustafsson that remixed our song and made it better than my song. He was the guitar player for Grendel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Grendel did a remix for us, which is kind of more or less how I came by them. But I don't know if everybody's going to love that song. I love that song. I love that song.
It's so funny because it's a departure from Grendel. Like that I know at least. I know that very hard industrial harsh techno type vibe. And that song is just so like different. It's a jam.
In fact, our song Sad and Beautiful off the album, I tried to channel Age of the Disposable Body a little bit in the groove of that song. It's a quite different song, but you can feel a little bit of connection between them, maybe.
Yeah, I made a playlist on Spotify called Sad Beats and put them both on there, and it works quite
Nice.
well. Yeah.
Well, MJ, Stephanie, this has been a true pleasure having you on. Here for Sounds and Shadows, we always love to spin out to a song by the artist so that people, if they've never heard you before, our fans can get an idea of what you sound like. So if you were to choose one song to spin out to give people an idea of the Amulet sound, what is it that you'd like us to play out to?
Are you gonna choose?
Well, didn't we say, because the only video we've got from the new album is For Your Love right there, right?
It's true. So
And it's pretty gothy, I think.
if you want to play the video for your love, I think that's good. But Dance of Duality is also getting very, very good reviews from people.
There's no video with Dance of Duality, but I mean, For Your Love is kind of goth rockish.
If
with-
that's the single in the video, let's spin out to it.
Let's do that.
yeah, Dance of Duality is more synthy,
Yeah.
but it's also, it's got its thing.
Yeah.
So hopefully people will like them both.
Well, this has been the Sounds and Shadows interview with Amulet. For all of you out there in interweb land, keep it dark, yo.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye.